Welcome to the Lotsa Helping Hands webinar series for this month, Caregiving During the Holidays. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really just delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Sherri Snelling, as well as very much looking forward to sharing with all of you tips and ideas for caregiving during the holidays, as well as specific ways that you can use your Lotsa Helping Hands community during the holiday season. We are grateful for the funding of this webinar that's been provided by the Alzheimer's Immunotherapy Program of Janssen Alzheimer Immunotherapy and Pfizer. The content for today's webinar was planned and developed by Lotsa Helping Hands. Again, my name is Brooks Kenny, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Lotsa Helping Hands. And I am so excited to welcome Sherri Snelling, who's going to be talking with us for the beginning of the session about caregiving and the holidays. Sherri, welcome.
Thank you, Brooks. It's great to be here.
I'm going to go ahead and tell everybody in the audience a little bit more about you so that they have a context for the wonderful information you're going to be sharing. Sherri is CEO of the Caregiving Club. It's a blogger to online sites reaching 5 million boomer women every month. She's also the executive producer and host of Handle with Care, which is a caregiver cable television program. She has been featured on CNN, Martha Stewart TV, MSNBC, CBS Evening News with Katie Couric, Fox Business Network, and is currently writing a book about celebrities who've been caregivers. Sherri is the former chairman of the National Alliance for Caregiving, a Washington, D.C. based nonprofit organization. So welcome again. Our agenda for this afternoon, we will be beginning with Sherri, and she's going to be focusing on starting the caregiving conversation with your family, as well as what signs to look for that indicate a loved one needs help. We'll then be wrapping up with some overview information about Lotsa Helping Hands and the service we provide, highlighting things like the vital information section, customizations for your calendar, and some tips that we think you'll find useful in your caregiving responsibilities, in particular during the holidays. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sherri, who's going to be walking us through a variety of things to look for and signs, if you will, that you may need to be starting that caregiving discussion. And Sherri, we all know that challenges that caregivers face are pretty significant, to say the least, but the holidays can be particularly difficult. And we know they also represent an opportunity for people to talk about their challenges and start conversations with siblings in the case of aging parents, and also asking for help. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. And again, thank you for being with us, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Absolutely. Well, Brooks, thanks again for inviting me, and it's great to talk to all of you, and thank you for joining us in these busy holiday times. But it is a perfect time, as Brooks said, to really focus on what are some of the critical signs that tell you that maybe an older parent or an older relative, things are changing for them in their lives, and things to think about where they might need some more care or some more help that you weren't really aware of. So I have this lovely photo up that you can see, and I love this quote, that life is a journey that is homeward bound. And I think that's so true. You know, so many of us are headed home for the holidays, whether you know, we're going cross country or maybe just across town to see family during these times. You know, the National Alliance for Caregiving puts out a great study every few years, and the latest study shows us that over 44 million Americans are caring for a loved one who is over the age of 50. And of those caregivers, about 7 to 8 million caregivers are actually long-distance caregiving, which means they live at least 2 hours away from their loved one, sometimes, you know, 2 states away, or as I said, across the country. And this makes it sometimes difficult on a daily basis to see what's going on with your loved one. So as you're headed home for the holidays or visiting family, you know, there are some things that you want to look at, and I think that's what we're going to focus on here first. And what I've done is I've put together what I'm calling the 10 signposts on the road to you are becoming a caregiver officially. There are a lot of great organizations out there that have put together lists on signs to look for that are similar, and I've kind of compiled what I think are the top 10. But I wanted to note some of these other organizations in case you want to check their websites, which I'll give you their sites at the end of this conversation. But the National Association of Area Agencies on Aging, AARP, the Alzheimer's Association, and also a nonprofit called Caring from a Distance, which is dedicated to caregivers who are caring long distance. All of these different organizations have signs to look for that your loved one needs more care on their website. So what are these 10 signs that I've chosen? The first one is kind of a common sense, if you will, but changes in eating or drinking habits. And this is more than just having the more than one cocktail, let's say, at a holiday party. But if you notice that your loved one has lost a lot of weight recently or gained a lot of weight recently, these are triggers that something's going on with their health, with their nutritional habits. We as we get older, it's harder and harder to keep those pounds off. But what is really critical is that as you gain weight and perhaps your body mass index is increasing, this can lead to other serious health risks such as hypertension, which then can lead to actual falls, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But it can also lead to things like diabetes type 2. So, just kind of taking a look at how your loved one looks and making sure that things haven't changed dramatically with their weight. And then when it comes to the drinking, again, we all tend to maybe over imbibe a little bit at the holidays. We're having fun. We didn't realize we grabbed that third glass of wine rather than staying at 2. But when it's a little bit more pronounced and not usual, if you have an older loved one who doesn't typically drink and all of a sudden they're drinking a lot, or you notice that you're with them for a few days and every single day they're over imbibing, those are signs that something's going on. And often when we do turn to bad habits, if you will, like smoking again or drinking more, these are signs that something else is going on. Perhaps it's has to do with depression over a situation, and those are triggers then to have a conversation, which I'll talk about a little bit later. This next photo, I don't know about how any of you feel, but I can tell you there are many mornings when I feel exactly like this. But all joking aside, personal hygiene is something that is another trigger sign for us to look at. So, if you notice with your loved one that all of a sudden their breath has a different odor, or even they have a different body odor that you're noticing that's pronounced, whether maybe their clothes are soiled and they've always been meticulous about their dress and all of a sudden you're noticing that they have stains and things on their clothes. Maybe they're neglecting their teeth or their nails, or even I had a friend who told me that she was really upset because she went home for the holidays and her mom had all of these skin sores and rashes and she hadn't really done anything about it. So those are all, again, signs to look for that something's going on when your loved one has personal hygiene issues. This next one is really, really important, and it's such a huge problem actually for all Americans, but particularly for older Americans who are needing to turn to different prescription drugs to manage certain chronic illnesses and other things that they might have going on. But medication adherence is a huge issue, and in fact I have a story of a caregiver I talked to, and her parents are in their early 80s. And her father is taking Lipitor for his cholesterol management, and her mother takes Lunesta to get to sleep at night. So they were rushing out the door to go to dinner, and her father's eyesight hasn't been as great lately, and he took what he thought was his Lipitor tablet and or Lipitor pill, and they went to dinner. Well, during dinner, which was at this nice Italian restaurant, he actually fell over face first into the spaghetti And her mother went into an absolute panic and called her and said, "Oh my gosh, I think your dad just died. He just fell over into the spaghetti, and they've called the emergency, the ambulance, and they're coming, and I need you to meet us at the hospital." So of course this caregiver was, in full crisis mode. And what they found was, once they got him, he actually was revived. So thank goodness he wasn't dead. But they got him into the ambulance and realized that he had taken the Lunesta. So he had actually fallen asleep. But all joking aside, the medication adherence and medication safety is a huge issue for all of us. In fact, over 125,000 older Americans die every year because they've taken the wrong medication or the wrong dosage. And over 1 million of our senior citizens are hospitalized because, again, they haven't taken their medications correctly. It's actually the fourth leading cause of death in the U.S. So this is something really, really serious that you need to take a look at. And what you might want to do if you are traveling home is, not to be snoopy, but if you, need to excuse yourself to go to the powder room, you might want to just take a look inside the medicine cabinet or on the bedside of your parents' bed and see how many medications they're taking and ask, that can also then start a conversation. I will tell you that when it comes to medications, there are some really great new technology products out there that can help you make sure you're taking the medication at the right time and the right dosage and the right prescription. And I have a lot of those types of tips on technology products in my blog, which I'll talk about later. The next tip or sign, if you will, to look for is a cluttered or unsanitary home. And if you step into your parents' home or your mom or dad's place and it looks like an episode of Hoarders, you've probably got a problem. I can tell you that I'm one of those kind of clutter nuts myself. I'm a magazine freak, and I've got my magazines all piled in the corner. But I've been doing that since I was about 16 years old, so I don't think that would trigger anybody to look at me and think things were different. But if you come home and you've noticed that there's a lot of old newspapers maybe lying around, maybe there's a lot of dishes in the sink that haven't been washed, check in the refrigerator and you're seeing that there's a lot of expired food, or even, because of some of this unsanitary conditions, you might even notice that there's pests or dust or other things. These are, again, if this isn't typical of your family member, these are triggers that something's going on. And it's definitely time then to have the conversation, and we'll talk about that at the end. The next sign is behavioral changes, and these are a little bit harder sometimes to gauge, but again, your parents and your mom and dad and other loved ones well, and if all of a sudden they're a lot more loud than they typically are, or maybe they're more withdrawn, they're a lot quieter, they're not maybe interacting with family as much as they used to, perhaps they're even paranoid or agitated a lot, and not communicating. These are all, again, if it's very, very different from what is normal, these are signs that something is definitely going on. I don't know if any of you are fans of the TNT TV show The Closer with Kira Sedgwick, but I watch that show pretty religiously, and they just did an episode where her father was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And one of the side effects of his illness was his trigger. It would trigger him to be very, very agitated and to lash out at family. And, it was very disconcerting for Brenda, the character that Kira Sedgwick plays. And these are, again, signs that something's going on. And that obviously, in that episode, it triggered the conversation around his recent diagnosis and what they were going to do. The other thing that I'll talk about, too, is that some of these signs, these behavioral changes, can also be indications of Alzheimer's or other dementia. And we do know that with Alzheimer's disease, right now today, there's over 5 million Americans who are diagnosed with Alzheimer's, but we also know that 50% of those who actually have the disease are not diagnosed. So there's a huge percentage of people who might have early warning signs of Alzheimer's disease, but they they don't realize it yet. And I'll talk a little bit about some of those signs too. The next signpost is around kind of social rituals, and this is another really important one. If you come home and you notice, or there's conversation, and all of a sudden you realize that mom's no longer going to church or synagogue, or maybe she's dropped out of her book club and she doesn't do that as much. Or dad, maybe he used to do lawn bowling, or going down and meeting some friends, to play bridge or poker or something, and all of a sudden these things aren't happening anymore. Those are signs when they're starting to avoid their typical social activities. These are really important signs to look for, and to engage your loved one in conversation around what's going on with them. Because these are signs of isolation, and isolation is a huge problem with our older American population. Typically what I've seen with a lot of the caregivers I've worked with, this tends to happen when you have a mom or a dad, and you've recently lost your other parent, and so they've lost their spouse after maybe many years of being married, and they're just they're adrift, and they don't really know how to kind of get back out there, and they are suffering from depression or certain signs of the blues, and so they've stopped doing normal things, or they haven't realized that they need to now engage in activities that will keep them active and keep them interacting. It's interesting, there's a book called The Blue Zones, and it was all about how to live longer, and in fact it was the author had gone around the world and interviewed centenarians, people who have lived to the age of 100, and he wanted to find out what their secrets were. One of the key themes in that book, no matter where he went in the world, was the social connectedness. So the ability for older Americans to continue to be connected to their family, to their grandkids, to their friends and neighbors, and even to, at a larger extent, community at large. And sometimes this is, again, where technology can come into play. In the TV show that Brooks mentioned that I produced called Handle with Care, which debuted on RLTV, which is a cable station carried through Comcast, our episode focused on a gentleman, Tony, who I love. He is a World War II veteran. He was actually a hero from the Battle of the Bulge. And he had been married for 50 years, and he had recently lost his wife. And he was living alone in an apartment, and typically, this happens so often, he had a fall and broke his hip. And so when he was discharged from the hospital after rehabilitation and came home, he was very depressed about a lot of things. He had lost his spouse, his best friend from all those years of living with her. He wasn't as mobile and as independent as he wanted to be, and so he was in a bit of a spiral. And his caregiver was his daughter-in-law, Debbie. And so what Debbie actually did is she encouraged him to go test out an assisted living facility, and they called it a test because he was very resistant to moving. So they said, well, let's just have you stay here while you're going through rehabilitation. Well, what happened is he got into this great program that they had at the Hebrew home in New York, and it was pairing up the residents with college students and teaching the residents how to get on the internet, how to create a Facebook page, and how to really engage with technology. And interestingly enough, Tony thrived from that experience. He absolutely embraced this technology. He in fact told me, he said, I've had a New York Times subscription my entire life, and I canceled my subscription because all I need to do is go on the internet and go on CNN.com, and I get all my news that I need. So I thought that was really a very inspirational story to show that older Americans certainly aren't wary of technology if you can guide them through it. And also it's a great way to keep your older loved one connected. And there's some great products out there that make getting on the internet or social media, Facebook type stuff very easy. So the next thing that that is a sign that we want to look for is really more around physical injuries and other issues. And again, bad falls. Falls are one of the key problems that happens to us as we get older. Our balance might be a little bit off, and this can be due to issues with blood pressure, and some other things. We might not realize that the stove is as hot as it is, and you can easily burn yourself. I certainly know that climbing stairs in my house is getting a little bit harder every day. So, trouble with walking or climbing stairs is another sign. And definitely hearing or seeing problems. We all know our eyesight and our hearing ability tends to decline as we age. One thing I wanted to note for you is that the Centers for Disease Control reports that over 2 million older Americans are treated in emergency rooms every year from falls. And these are falls that typically happen in the home. It can come about because, as I said, maybe your blood pressure is a little off, and you're out of balance. Or if you live back east where it's colder, and particularly now during the holidays, you might slip on icy stairs leading up to your home. So, 18,000 seniors die every year from falls that occur in the home. And so it's really important to look for signs to make sure that they're safe. Sometimes it's easier if they're living in a bedroom that's upstairs. It might be easier if they have a downstairs bedroom to kind of transfer that bedroom to downstairs to make it a little easier for their mobility. So there are a lot of things that you can look for that will make it easier for them. And certainly if they're having problems with hearing or seeing, you want to make sure that you help them get that checked. And again, from a technology standpoint, I know hearing aids are quite expensive, but there's some great new technology out there that is available through retailers like Radio Shack, and even through audiologists that are some low-cost solutions for hearing problems. I also know that there are certain health plans now that are incorporating or adding hearing aids and hearing assistant devices into certain plans. So those are things certainly to look for if you feel that your loved one is having problems with hearing or eyesight. The next sign, again, they're all very important, but my goodness, in these tough economic times, mishandled finances are really, really critical. And one of the reasons why I say that is because, a lot of our parents feel that they've taken care of themselves, and they don't want to be a burden to their children, their adult children. But so often, in fact, I worked on a study with the National Alliance for Caregiving a couple years ago that showed that on average, more than half of all caregivers are spending 10% of their annual income on care-related services and products for their loved ones. So even though you think things may be covered by Medicare, or your parents feel that, no, I've got that covered, I can pay for that, we're finding that a lot of caregivers are digging into their own pockets and their own finances in order to help their loved one with different things that need to be covered. So one of the things that you want to be careful of looking at is mishandled finances. And these are things like, if you notice on the credenza in your parents' home that maybe there's a lot of past due bills and notices that are, the envelopes aren't even opened, or maybe if you do already help your parents with their finances and their checking account, you might notice that they're paying bills twice, or overpaying certain bills. So if there's any kind of documentation as well, or maybe if a parent mentions, oh yeah, I just refinanced my house, or I just did this with my mortgage, you may want to dig into that conversation a bit, because so often there are a lot of scammers and schemers out there when it comes to our older Americans who are reaching out to them and trying to get them to do certain things with their mortgage that can be detrimental to their future and then also to your future. So it's really important that again, we don't want to be snoopy and we don't want to invade anyone's privacy, but you're a partner with your parent or your loved one in their future care and your role as a caregiver, and you want to make sure that you know everything that's going on, and that's one of the ways I'll talk about that you can have that conversation. It's a real partnership. The other thing, and this also plays into kind of the financial aspect, is the unusual purchases. A lot of older Americans, if they're not getting out and about as much and they're sitting home, they might have Home Shopping Network on all the time, and all of a sudden you come home for the holidays and you see all of these purchases in the corner from Home Shopping Network. Those are signs that maybe something's going on. So you want to take a look at, pay attention to any conversations where certain things have changed, where all of a sudden mom is just buying everything off of, QVC, or perhaps they talk about telemarketers calling all the time, or this nice telemarketer I just talked to the other day, or different contests that they're signing up for. They're just warning signs that you want to talk through with them how to be careful, how to make sure that they're not going to have identity theft through internet purchases and those kinds of things. So that's something to also be on the lookout for. And then the last one is again, this is kind of a gray area, if you will, sometimes, because as we age, we do start to forget things. I mean, my goodness, sometimes I find myself not being able to pull up a name or a factoid when I'm talking to someone. So that's just a normal part of aging. But when is it more than just normal aging? When is it something to be truly concerned about? And there are things that your loved one, you might observe they're starting to do. For instance, if they've cooked the holiday meal and you notice that they've left the stove on all night, or maybe they've left the front door wide open, you're staying with them for a couple of days and all of a sudden the door's wide open, or maybe you're getting in the car with them to drive somewhere and they forget where they're going. These are all signs that are above and beyond normal aging forgetfulness. And I mentioned earlier the Alzheimer's Association and the prevalence of Alzheimer's disease as we get older. We know from the Alzheimer's Association that 1 out of every 2 Americans over the age of 85 will develop Alzheimer's disease. So it's as we get older, there is more and more prevalence, if you will, of this disease. And there are specific signs that are related to Alzheimer's. And one of the things that the Alzheimer's Association encourages people to do is to know these 10 early warning signs of that disease and to be aware of them, because if you do have a loved one that you fear might have the disease, and you go through and check off the list and they've got maybe 4 or 5 of these 10 signs, that's a sign that you do want to get them to their healthcare provider and their doctor, and maybe get an official diagnosis, because that will allow the family to plan ahead while your loved one still can participate. As they age and they start to the disease develops, they may not be able to participate in their future care decisions, and then it becomes very emotionally wrought for families and particularly for caregivers. So early diagnosis is actually helpful for a lot of families so that they can make those plans together. So obviously the Alzheimer's Association has the 10 warning signs for that disease on their website. And it is important to note, the Shriver report, which was done last year, found that 10 million women are actually affected by Alzheimer's disease. They're either diagnosed with the disease or they are the caregiver of someone with Alzheimer's or dementia. So we know that women run a higher risk, obviously, when it comes to this disease. So from my standpoint, there's a lot of other signs that maybe you can look for. And one of the things we haven't talked about on this webinar, because it's really a whole separate discussion and a separate webinar, and maybe Brooks will have me back for that, but it's around seniors and driving. And if you do go home for the holidays and you do happen to get in the car with your loved one, or you notice that maybe there's some dings and something, dents in the car that weren't there before, or they're driving a little too close to the curb, or being a little hesitant, or maybe they don't look like they're sitting correctly in their seat. There's a lot of different signs and things to look for when it comes to driving, and driving is certainly a trigger, a hot button issue as we age, because it is a huge sign of our independence. And so driving retirement and that whole conversation around giving up the keys is a really difficult conversation to have, and there's a lot of great organizations out there that have developed great tools that will help. There's also a lot of really wonderful alternative transportation plans and things that you can do. So Maybe we'll have a whole separate webinar on driving one of these days. So how do you start the conversation? And this is something, when I worked with caregivers, they said, okay, so I've seen the signs. I know my mom or my dad might need more help, but they're resistant. They don't want, they just blow me off and they say, oh, honey, don't worry about it. I'm fine. So how do you have this conversation? Because it's a really difficult one, again, to have your parent feel like you're the person now who's more concerned about their care. So what I did is I created something I've called the CARE Plan, CARE, and that helps me remember, okay, these are the 4 things that will help me have that conversation. So C is really just this whole, how do I start it? How do I create this conversation around caregiving? So here's a couple tips. One of the ways that I found works really well is if you can take something that's happened in the news recently, and celebrities are easy for us all to talk about. I mean, we gossip about celebrities, or we chuckle or roll our eyes at something that's going on within the celebrity world. And I've had fun actually interviewing a lot of these celebrities who have been in caregiving situations. And as Brooke mentioned, my book that is compiling their stories will come out and be published next year. But I wanted to note for you, here are some recent news around celebrities who have been caregivers. Diane Keaton just wrote a wonderful memoir called Then Again, which is all about her life with her mom. And it talks a lot about, all the lessons that she learned from her mother, but she goes into talking about the last 10 or 15 years of her mother's life. Her mother did suffer from Alzheimer's disease. And here's something I wanted to read to you, which is from her book, because Diane became a classic sandwich generation caregiver. She had adopted 2 children later in life, and at the same time she found her mother was diagnosed with this awful disease, and she was sandwiched between the care of these 2 different generations. So she wrote this. She said, as mother struggled to complete sentences, I watched Dexter, my daughter, and a few years later little Duke, my son, begin to form words as a means to capture the wonder of their developing minds. The state of being a woman in between 2 loves, one as a daughter and the other as a mother, has changed me. It's been a challenge to witness the betrayal of such a cruel disease while learning to give love with the promise of stability. And I just thought that was a beautiful quote because it really captures what goes on with sandwich generation caregivers. They really are squeezed between the care of these 2 loved ones, and it's a difficult time. The picture in the middle is actually a new friend of mine, Sylvia Mackey, and her late husband, John Mackey. And for anyone who's a football fan, John Mackey is pretty famous. He was a Baltimore Colts tight end, a Super Bowl legend. He played in the 60s and the 70s, and he was just a phenomenal football player, part of the Hall of Fame. And unfortunately, John had been diagnosed 10 years before he passed away this summer with frontal temporal dementia. And, contrary to a lot of beliefs, we look at caregivers and we say, yeah, but you know what, they've got a lot of money and they can hire all this staff. They're not like me. They're not like the typical caregivers. And in a lot of ways, you're right. They have a lot more financial help and support, if you will, and resources to help them out. But that doesn't mean they don't go on the emotional roller coaster that we know can happen with caregiving. And for Sylvia and John, despite the fact that he'd been this phenomenally famous football player, in the 60s and 70s, they weren't making the multi-million-dollar contracts, and they struggled. He obviously could no longer work, and it even became difficult for him to do things that a lot of the former retired players do, like signing autographs. And Sylvia had to go back and get a job as a United Airlines flight attendant. And so when I actually sat down with her last week for my book, and she'll be one of the great stories that I'll be showcasing. But, this is, not only is she fabulously gorgeous, by the way, she is a former model, but she's a fierce and fearless caregiver, and I really give her kudos because she did not, give up in making John's life as normal as possible. They continued to travel to Super Bowls, and she figured out ways to get through TSA without it being a huge crisis for them. And she also wrote a very, very poignant letter to Paul Tagliabue, who was the head of the NFL. And she said, I think it's actually disgraceful that the NFL doesn't have some type of support for families and retired players who have given so much to the game and who now are struggling because of these different diseases. And what came out of that letter is something called the 88 plan. And the NFL actually embraced Sylvia's plea and created a long-term care insurance plan for retired NFL players who have dementia, Alzheimer's, ALS, or Parkinson's. And I really, congratulate Sylvia for being such a champion for families and for caregivers. And then on the right-hand side is one of the latest stories that comes out of celebrity caregiving, which is Glenn Campbell, who recently announced his diagnosis of Alzheimer's. And that's his wife, Kim, who, as she knows, has a very long caregiving journey ahead of her, but she's preparing as best as she can. And, these are great ways to start a conversation with your loved one, because when you can say, gosh, Mom, I just read this book by Diane Keaton. Or if you say to your dad, Dad, do you remember John Mackey? Remember that great Super Bowl catch he made in the 70s? Then all of a sudden you can start talking about what is happening, what they're going through, and that can lead you into, Dad, it made me think about, what do you see for your long-term care? What can I do to help? How can we make sure that we're all going to be okay through this? And I think that's a big part of the conversation. You're a partner in future care for your loved one. It is a partnership. You're not invading their privacy. You're not being overbearing. They need to understand that as much as they don't want to be a burden to you, they will become a burden if they don't sit down and talk with you about what the plan is. And that kind of leads me into the next one, and that is A of our care plan, our care conversation. And it's acknowledge your loved one's wishes. When you start to have this conversation, you really need to ask them, what do you want to see happen? What if this were to happen, or if this were to happen? It's really, really important that you understand what their wishes are now before crisis occurs. I've worked with so many families, and unfortunately, their loved one is now in a situation where they cannot speak for themselves. They might be in a coma, or they might have dementia and not be able to have that conversation. And it's much more difficult on families, because that's when a lot of this strife and stress and conflict can happen, because siblings or others might have different ideas about what should happen. So as long as your loved one is saying, this is what I want, and I want everyone to know it, that makes it so much easier on the primary caregiver when the crisis happens or when a situation occurs, that you can say, well, remember when Mom told us this 5 years ago? We need to honor her wishes. And one of the ways that'll help you do that is there is actually a great document. I really love this. It's from a nonprofit organization called Aging with Dignity, and it's called The 5 Wishes. And it's actually a document that takes you through what it is you want to have happen in a situation. So for instance, who will make medical decisions for you? And it helps lead you to get that healthcare directive and the power of attorney for medical decisions created. But it's a great starter for what are your wishes. And I encourage you to go to their website, which I'll give you at the end here, and download that. And maybe it's something where you just simply say, Mom, I want to make sure that I'm doing what you want. And I found this online. I listened to this webinar the other day, and I thought maybe you could just read it over and we can talk about it later. And that gives them then, the time to absorb it, to think about it, but to really realize that this is really important for both of you. R is really then review what is planned. It's really, really important to know, do you have a healthcare directive? Do you have a living will? Has all that been taken care of? So often we assume that these things are done, and they're not. And when they're not, it can be devastating to families, but from an emotional standpoint, from a financial standpoint. So it is really important, again, you want to say, I just want to make sure, Mom, that you've got this in place, because I know what can happen in these days and times, and I just want to make sure, again, that we're protecting you and we're carrying out your wishes. And so just reviewing with them what they already have, where you can find it, is critical. You may not have to look at it specifically, but it really is critical. And then engaging the whole family. Again, you might become the primary caregiver and your sister might live across country and you're the one that's local. You need to have a conversation with her about how she's going to be engaged. I actually talked to a couple of caregivers, two sisters who went through this. One sister was becoming so overwhelmed and stressed because she actually was the primary caregiver, and her sister would call who lived cross country and she would say, well, why aren't you doing this? Well, what about this? And she wasn't there locally. So the primary caregiver sister was like, you know what? I'm done with this. she she needs to come out here if she thinks she knows everything. Anyway, they had a great conversation, and what they worked out is that the sister who lived long distance was actually going to help out financially and oversee a lot of the financial end of things, whereas the primary and local caregiver was doing more of the physical caregiving, and it actually worked well for them, and they became great partners in their mom's care. And so that's a wonderful story about how to engage your family. But you also need to talk to your spouse and say, listen, I'm going to need your support. I've got to help mom out more, and I'm going to need you to do this or do this. You talk to your kids about what's going on with maybe grandma or grandpa so that they understand their role as well and why mom or dad may not be here for this or that, so that they get it. So it's really important to really engage the whole family, and that basically is the care plan. So my note to you is, first of all, thank you so much for listening. I hope that you find a lot of the signs on your journey of caregiving and also how to have the care conversation helpful. So no matter where you're headed this holiday season, I just want to say, hopefully you can absorb all this and it will help you out in your future. And then I just wanted to leave you with the note of my focus for what I do with my business and a lot of the writings and other things that we do at the TV show is really to help caregivers balance caring for themselves while they're caring for a loved one. So often we tend to neglect our own health and wellness needs because we just are overwhelmed caring for everybody else. So, finding those moments where you can have some me time and you can get away and do something that really helps you, and whether it's just having a cup of coffee with a friend, whether it's going to see a movie, maybe taking a walk or getting to a gym class. I know all those things are so hard when you're juggling so much, but it's so, so critical. Studies have shown us that caregivers are twice as likely as the general population to develop multiple chronic illness due to the prolonged stress of caregiving. So I really encourage you to embrace your me time. And one of the things that I've done that maybe will help you is I've created a weekly video called the Me Time Monday video. And it's in coordination and support of a great organization called Healthy Monday campaign. And they've created a campaign around caregivers called Caregivers Monday. And there's a lot of great tips on their website on how to balance caring for yourself while you're caring for a loved one. And my videos play into some of those tips that we've looked at together that will help caregivers do just that. And with that, I will leave you with this slide, which is basically the different websites that you can go to that I've referenced throughout this webinar that hopefully will help you. And I think this is a really nice segue to pass it back to Brooks, because one of the things that we know is critical for caregivers is getting a break and having the help and the circle of care around you. And that's one of the things that Lotsa Helping Hands does so well. They answer that question, what can I do to help? Well, guess what? There is help to be had, and Lotsa Helping Hands helps you do that. So Brooks, thanks again for having me speak to your audience today.
Thank you so much, Sherri. That was really, really powerful information. And as I was listening to it, and I'm sure others on the line would feel similarly, many of the tips that you shared are everyday tips that we might not think of, and it's kind of like an aha. These very practical things that now having them top of mind as we approach the holidays and caregiving situations. It's so valuable, and the many ideas you shared on how to get those conversations started, I hope our listeners take with them into the holiday season. So thank you so much for sharing with us. As Sherri mentioned, one of the big things that we hear from caregivers and our more than 500,000 folks who participate in Lotsa Helping Hands, that caregivers need help. If you're caring for a loved one and you're dealing with either the news of a medical crisis, or you are unprepared for the role of caregiver, then often what happens is you have a lot of folks coming around you saying, we'd like to help you. What can we do? And Lotsa Helping Hands was created really to assist those who are caring for someone in crisis or going through a challenging time. They're often overwhelmed with offers of help and phone calls to return. And family, friends, neighbors, colleagues, everyone wants to help, but they aren't really sure what they can do or how they best can lend a hand. And so while we hear these stories every day, we've put together a service that, as I said, is used by 500,000 and growing, that allows someone to organize those offers of help and be able to answer that question. We've created Lotsa Helping Hands really to bring together the family, friends, church, synagogue members, people that are coming around the family and saying, what can I do to help? There's got to be a better way to organize it. And we empower someone's circles of community in order to offer that help. The Lotsa Helping Hands service allows you to create a free private community website that organizes help during times of need. The service is free, and if you go to lotsahelpinghands.com, you can easily create a community website to support you. The service includes a set of features designed specifically for the caregiver as well as those who want to support them, that person's circles of community. This is a demonstration community called Todd's Helping Hands, and there's already activities on the calendar. Our coordination calendar allows you to post volunteer tasks that might be needed to help in a particular situation. It's an easy way to organize well-meaning offers of help for meals delivery, rides and visits, or other tasks unique to your situation. Your community's homepage shows a 2-month calendar view, and below the preview is a list of activities sorted by type. So you can use this to quickly access specific activities to see what's needed and when. For example, if you aren't offering meals but you wanted to offer a ride, you could easily click on the ride at the bottom of the preview and look at the larger calendar view. You can sign up to help the family, and then the system sends you reminders 1 month, 1 week, and 1 day in advance so that everybody can be reminded of their commitments to help the family. You can also access a larger view of the calendar by clicking on this community section. We have a growing list of community building features within these private websites. Community building features allow members of each community to easily connect with one another. Members can share photos, post announcements, use our message boards, send well wishes to the family, and share other information. And coordinators can also create special community sections within their private website to meet the unique needs of their family. The service includes a vital information section. This allows for coordinators to safely store and retrieve vital information to the family, from medical and health records to financial and legal documents. And you can make this information available either to the entire family or to select members. This is just a demonstration again of Todd's Helping Hands, where you can see the vital information section that's easily accessed from the home page. The content is stored in different sections to keep things really well organized and easy to access. Each section includes its own permission settings, which can allow you to make the section available to the entire community, exclusively to the coordinators, those people who administer the site, or to additional volunteers and members, those who may be part of the immediate family and are signing up to help mom and dad, or perhaps, as Sherri mentioned, that distance caregiver who is, as the sibling who might not be, coming to the house every day to bring meals, but maybe someone in that distant caregiver could be the one organizing the vital information section via the technology at Lotsa Helping Hands. On the left here, you can see the different types of subsections within the vital information area that allow you to store the details of important elements of wherever you might be in the caregiving journey. Here are just some examples of the subsections within vital information. The medication subsection allows you to list medication names, prescribing physicians, refill dates, daily dosages, the form that the medication takes, and whether or not it is actively being taken. There are 2 subsections that will also allow you to track financial and legal contacts and documents. You can list names, phone numbers, and notes for the various people that are part of your loved one's life. And in the financial and legal documents, you can also list important documents and their location. And this is really useful for insurance policies, proxies, tax records, passports, and anything else that you might need. And lastly, you can store emergency contact information as well as the details for getting in touch with family, friends, and doctors. This is a really wonderful way to pull everything together, have it in one place, and have folks within the circles of communities. So even if you are the adult daughter of mom who's the primary caregiver, but you've got family and loved ones across the country who want to be involved, the vital information section, particularly when caring for older adults, is a really great way to keep track of everything, have people that are caregiving from a distance stay involved with what's going on, and really support the family. We've heard from thousands and thousands of members the peace of mind that comes with having all of these important details to providing caregiving, from making safe and informed decisions, remembering all of the little pieces that potentially could fall through the cracks, having it all in one place at your fingertips within your very private and very safe and secure Lotsa Helping Hands community website is a great value. We wanted to just highlight a few quick tips. We know that most of you, or many of you on the call today, are already members of Lotsa Helping Hands communities. So perhaps you are the caregiver, perhaps you are a friend or a neighbor of someone who's caring for mom or dad, or a friend who has a diagnosis and needs some extra help. But we know many of you are also still learning about Lotsa Helping Hands. So again, the service is free. It allows you to create a private community website to organize all this help through the calendar. And we wanted to just highlight a few key things that you might consider during the holidays. And the first is on the coordination calendar. While the calendar is most commonly used for, regular caregiving activities, such as rides to medical appointments or rides to soccer practice for children who maybe if one of the parents is going through a medical crisis, but Johnny still needs to get to soccer. There are meals and rides and visits that are often incorporated into the calendar for volunteers to provide support to the family. But there are also some great opportunities to use the calendar to make day-to-day life a bit easier for someone who's caregiving during the holidays. If you're in the area, for example, in an area where winter means snow for you, which I know, Sherri, you are not, you lucky lucky person. But if you're experiencing those heavy cold winters, and you might consider adding something like scheduling a weekly activity for shoveling or ice cleanup for someone who might be susceptible to a fall or might not have the ability to take care of it themselves. So you can see this example within your existing community at Lotsa Helping Hands. You could add help shoveling the driveway. You could also schedule some one-day events that might require some extra support. Caregiving is an extra job already, but add the holidays and the feeling that we often have that we want our homes decorated, we want our perhaps holiday or New Year's cards out the door. Maybe there are things that your community can help you with, like taking down decorations, or maybe you want to organize a present wrapping party, or things that you can do to get folks ready for the new year. And really, we want you to look at the Lotsa Helping Hands opportunity as not only the maybe day-to-day things, but depending on the time of year, and the holidays is one, when you're feeling more overwhelmed as a caregiver, there's some creative ways that you can simply add your needs to the calendar or ask whoever the coordinator is of your community to add those needs. And if you're a member or a volunteer for a caregiver, or you see someone struggling and juggling with their caregiving, particularly during the holidays, this is something you might offer to them. Let me set up a Lotsa Helping Hands community website for you. Let's organize some of these extra tasks that are upon you as a caregiver, especially during the holidays, and let's help you so that you have some more peace of mind this time of year. We also wanted to highlight the message boards. This is just one of the many community features that we have within the websites. And it's an opportunity for members to post really anything they want or to discuss or share things with community members. You can click on the message board here to create a new post or just reply to someone else's by leaving a comment. We have found from listening to our members that the emotional support folks receive by sharing information, by posting a well wish, by posting a question about, does anybody know how I can add a ramp to my mom's side door so that it's more accessible to her. Anything from sharing information to, during the holidays, maybe just giving thanks. If you are a recipient in a community and people are gathering to help you, you can use the message board to say thanks, saying thanks for the help that they're providing. Perhaps you want to just brighten someone's day within the community, the person who the community was created for, posting a link to a video, a picture, or an article, or a holiday poem that moved you. The message board is a really wonderful way to bring folks together within this private community, and we've seen it used in many different ways and encourage you to customize it in the way that works for you. Here's just an example with regard to the holidays. Just folks saying it was really wonderful to get together and help you all decorate the tree. And so again, as we are embarking upon this already extremely busy and overwhelming time, if you are a caregiver or you know someone who is, and they're in a Lotsa Helping Hands community, this is a great way to share with them or to offer to create one and help them with their tasks and provide this type of emotional support. I ran through those slides rather quickly, and so I wanted to just highlight for folks that actually we had a bunch of questions that came through in the beginning, first half of the webinar that we were responding to and still are technical questions that folks might have about how to create a community website. So we tried to get to as many of them as we could, and we certainly will answer the balance of them following the webinar this afternoon. But I do want to highlight for you that Lotsa Helping Hands has a round-the-clock member support center, and that center is all about helping. And we are here for you, whether you have created a community already, if you're a caregiver and you're scratching your head right now and saying, how could I even get started with this? Reach out to us. We're here to help. We can help you think through how to get started, walk you through the steps of creating a community, help you think about how you might talk about this during the holidays with your loved ones if this is something that you need. And we can also point you to the resources that you learned about today. We do have resources on our website, including tips and features, examples of our service, issues from our newsletter. We also have webinars, and one of them is entitled Getting Started. And that webinar walks you through the very simple steps to create your own private free community website at Lotsa Helping Hands, which has a number of resources for you as well as tips and features. So we encourage you, if you're new to Lotsa Helping Hands, to check out the website and check out those webinars. Sherri, did you want to just highlight where folks, well, I'm happy actually to do it for you if you don't mind.
Sure.
I encourage you all to reach out and check out some of the amazing resources that Sherri is putting together and has put together for caregivers. Wonderful Me Time Monday videos, as she said, tips on Facebook and Twitter, and all those videos on YouTube as well. Just a great resource, and Sherri is a master at understanding caregiver needs and speaking in the language that really resonates. And so we encourage everyone on the line today to take a look at the offerings that she has there and the wonderful articles and very meaningful blogs and content. So we thank you for what you do on behalf of caregivers, Sherri.
Well, thank you, Brooks.
We also hope that you'll reach out to us on obviously Facebook and Twitter, where we post resources and information. But most importantly, do feel free to contact us through our member support center at support@lotshelpinghands.com and let us know how we can help you in your caregiving journey. On behalf of all of us at Lotsa Helping Hands, I want to just thank Sherri for participating and providing us with this wonderful content today. And I, again, grateful for the funding that was provided for this webinar, and want to share our warmest holiday wishes for each and every one of you on the line today, whether you are new to Lotsa Helping Hands, whether you've been part of our growing family for years. We wish you all the best in this holiday season, and we hope that we continue to be able to provide support to you in your caregiving journey, wherever it might take you. So thank you for participating. A recording of this webinar will be available on our website soon, and we will provide answers to each and every question that was posed during the hour that we shared together today. So thanks very much, everyone, and our best holiday wishes to you.